You feel it, even if you consider yourself rational, even if you don't believe in superstition, even if you pride yourself on evidence-based thinking and would never rearrange your life around a folk belief. When a black cat crosses your path, something twitches, something beneath conscious thought, something installed so early and reinforced so constantly that it operates below the level of reason. A micro-flinch, a half-second of unease, a flicker of something that isn't quite fear but that lives in the same neighborhood. You don't act on it, you don't turn around or change your route, but you feel it. And the feeling is so universal, so culturally pervasive, so automatic in its activation that you've never stopped to ask the question that would unravel everything. Who taught you to fear a cat? Not who told you the superstition. Who installed the fear? Because the superstition didn't come from nowhere. It didn't emerge spontaneously from the collective human unconscious. It was manufactured at a specific moment in history, by a specific institution, for a specific purpose, and the purpose had nothing to do with cats and everything to do with the people who kept them. Start with what the black cat was before it was feared, because the before is so radically different from the after that the transition itself becomes the evidence of deliberate manipulation. Ancient Egypt. The civilization that built the pyramids, that developed one of the most sophisticated medical systems in the ancient world, that maintained a continuous culture for over 3,000 years, venerated cats with an intensity that bordered on obsession. Cats were sacred, not casually respected, not appreciated as useful pest controllers. Sacred, divine, the earthly manifestation of Bastet, the goddess of home, fertility, protection, and healing. Bastet was depicted as a woman with the head of a cat, or as a cat itself, always black, always sleek, always radiating the composed, watchful intelligence that anyone who has lived with a cat recognizes immediately. Killing a cat in ancient Egypt was punishable by death. When a household cat died, the family shaved their eyebrows in mourning. Cats were mummified with the same care given to human dead. Tens of thousands of cat mummies have been discovered in Egyptian burial sites. The veneration wasn't symbolic, it was structural. Cats were woven into the daily fabric of Egyptian religious, medical, and domestic life with a thoroughness that suggests the Egyptians understood something about the animal that went beyond companionship, and the cat they venerated most intensely was the black cat. The deeper I went into the Egyptian relationship with cats, the more I found that the association between the black cat and healing was specific, documented, and persistent. Bastet wasn't a generic feline deity. She was specifically associated with protection against disease, with the guarding of pregnant women, with the defense of the household against malevolent forces. The black cat in the Egyptian home wasn't a pet. It was a guardian, a living pharmaceutical, a creature whose presence was understood to confer specific health benefits on the household it inhabited. This raises a simple but critical question. If the most medically advanced civilization of the ancient world considered the black cat sacred and associated it with healing and protection, what happened to reverse that association so completely that the modern world treats the same animal as a symbol of bad luck and evil? The silence was deafening, as if they were following instructions they didn't fully understand. The answer begins in 1233 AD. A specific date, a specific document, a specific institution. Pope Gregory IX issued the papal bull Vox in Rama. Go read it, it's available in translation. The document describes, in lurid detail, alleged rituals practiced by a heretical sect in Germany. The rituals, as described by the papal document, involve the worship of a black cat as an incarnation of the devil. The cat appears at gatherings. The worshippers kiss the cat speaks, the cat facilitates communion with Satan. The document is not a theological treatise, it's a propaganda instrument, a piece of institutional communication designed to associate a specific animal with a specific spiritual enemy in the minds of a population that trusted the institution issuing the communication. Vox in Rama didn't just describe alleged heresy, it authorized its persecution. The document gave ecclesiastical authorities the framework for identifying, prosecuting, and punishing anyone associated with the practices it described. And the practices it described were associated with cats, black cats specifically. The cat became a marker, an identifier, a diagnostic tool for the detection of heresy. If you kept a black cat, you might be a heretic. If your neighbor kept a black cat, your neighbor might be a heretic. The animal that the ancient world had associated with healing and protection was rebranded in a single papal document as a companion of the devil. The deeper I went into the consequences of Vox in Rama, the more the scale of what followed became staggering. Because the papal bull didn't just create a superstition, it created a campaign. Across Europe, in the decades and centuries that followed, cats were systematically killed, not randomly, systematically, in organized events, in public rituals, in festivals where cats were gathered, caged, and burned alive as spectacles of spiritual purification. The Festival of Cats in Ypres, Belgium, involved throwing live cats from the belfry of the Cloth Hall. Midsummer festivals across France included the burning of cats in bonfires while crowds watched and cheered. The killing wasn't marginal, it was mainstream, it was entertainment. It was an institutionally endorsed act of spiritual hygiene performed on an animal that the institution had designated as an instrument of evil, and the killing focused on black cats. Because the papal document had specified black. Because black was the color of darkness, of night, of the devil's domain. Because the visual marker made identification simple. A black cat was more dangerous than a tabby. A black cat was more suspicious than a white one. The color coding gave the population a simple diagnostic. Black meant evil. Black meant danger. Black meant heresy, living in your neighbor's kitchen. The pattern repeats with unsettling precision across the next 3 centuries. Because the war against the black cat was inseparable from the war against the people who kept them. And the people who kept them were, overwhelmingly, the people the church most needed to eliminate. Herbalists, healers, the women who maintained the old medical traditions, the women who treated illness with plants and animal companionship and practices handed down through generations of empirical observation, the women who the church would eventually call witches. Here's where the thread connects the cat to the healer and the healer to the institution that needed both eliminated. Because the medieval herbalist, the wise woman, the village healer, was the primary medical resource for the rural populations of Europe. She treated illness, she attended births, she prescribed remedies, she maintained a body of practical medical knowledge that had been transmitted from woman to woman for centuries, and that operated entirely outside institutional control. She didn't answer to the church. She didn't answer to the university-trained physician. She answered to her patients, and her patients trusted her because her treatments worked, and she kept cats. The association between the healer and the cat wasn't coincidental, it was functional. Cats controlled the rodents that spread disease. Cats protected the stored herbs that the healer used in her practice. Cats were, in the most practical sense, a component of the healer's medical infrastructure. The cat in the healer's cottage wasn't a familiar in the supernatural sense. It was a colleague in the medical sense. An animal whose presence directly contributed to the health outcomes that the healer's patients experienced. The deeper I went into the witch trial records, the more I found that the cat, particularly the black cat, appeared in accusation after accusation as evidence of diabolical practice. The accused woman kept a black cat. Therefore, she was a witch. The logical structure of the accusation was circular and self-reinforcing. The church had declared the black cat an instrument of the devil. The healer kept a black cat. Therefore, the healer was an agent of the devil. The cat was both the evidence and the crime. The animal that the healer kept for practical medical reasons became the proof of the supernatural allegiance that the institution needed to justify her elimination, and eliminate her they did. The witch trials of the 15th through 17th centuries killed an estimated 40,000 to 60,000 people across Europe, the overwhelming majority of them women, many of them healers, many of them accused on the basis of evidence that included the keeping of cats. The trials didn't just kill individuals, they destroyed a tradition, the medical knowledge that the healers carried, the empirical pharmaceutical tradition that had been transmitted from woman to woman for centuries was severed. The women were killed. Their knowledge died with them. Their cats were killed alongside them. And the medical vacuum they left was filled by the institutional medicine that the church endorsed, the university-trained physician whose practice was sanctioned by the same authority that had eliminated his competition. The pattern repeats with unsettling precision. A distributed knowledge system, the healer's tradition, eliminated by an institution that couldn't control it. The instrument of that elimination was the demonization of the healer's most visible companion. The black cat became the symbol of everything the institution feared, not because the cat was dangerous, because the healer was independent. The cat was collateral, the target was the woman, and the weapon was fear. Now here's where the investigation connects to something that the official narrative has never adequately addressed. Because the mass killing of cats across Europe in the centuries following Vox in Rama coincided with something that no historian disputes, but that very few historians connect to the cat killings. The Black Death, the bubonic plague, the pandemic that killed between 30 and 60% of Europe's population between 1347 and 1353, carried by fleas, hosted by rats, spread through the rodent populations that thrived in the same environments where human beings lived, ate, and stored their food. The same rodent populations that cats, particularly the cats that lived in human households and that had been systematically exterminated by the hundreds of thousands across the preceding century, would have controlled. The deeper I went into the timeline, the more the correlation became impossible to ignore. The campaign against cats began in the early 1200s with Vox in Rama. The cat population of Europe was dramatically reduced over the following century through organized killing. The Black Death arrived in the mid-1300s, carried by the rodent population that the decimated cat population could no longer control. The institution that had ordered the killing of cats presided over the spiritual response to the plague that the killing had helped to spread. The church that had eliminated the rat's primary predator then administered last rites to the millions who died from the disease the rats carried. I'm not claiming the cat killings caused the Black Death. The plague originated in Central Asia and would have reached Europe regardless. But I'm asking whether the scale of the pandemic, the speed of its spread, the mortality rate within European cities was worsened by a century of systematic elimination of the one domestic animal that controlled the rodent population. The question has been asked by historians, the correlation has been noted, and the answer, while not definitive, is uncomfortable enough that the institutional narrative prefers to keep the cat killings and the plague in separate chapters. Here's where the story comes back to you, to the flinch you feel when a black cat crosses your path. Because that flinch is the residue of a 700-year propaganda campaign. A campaign that began with a papal document in 1233, that associated a healing animal with the devil, that targeted the women who kept it, that killed the women and the cats together. That may have contributed to the conditions that allowed the worst pandemic in European history to achieve its catastrophic mortality. And that left behind, as its most durable legacy, a superstition so deeply embedded in Western culture that it operates beneath conscious thought in the nervous systems of people who consider themselves rational. The deeper I went, the more the black cat superstition started to look like the most successful propaganda campaign in human history. 700 years after Vox in Rama, the fear persists, not as a conscious belief, as a feeling, as a flinch, as a microsecond of unease that activates automatically in the presence of a black cat. The institution that created the fear is no longer actively promoting it. It doesn't need to. The fear is self-sustaining. It transmits from parent to child, through culture, through stories, through the accumulated weight of 7 centuries of repetition. The original purpose, the elimination of the healer and her companion, has been achieved so completely that the fear has become orphaned, a weapon without a wielder, a program still running on hardware that has forgotten who installed it. And here's what the rest of the world has to say about black cats, because the fear is not universal, it's Western. It's specifically the product of the Roman Catholic sphere of influence and the cultures it shaped. In Japan, black cats are considered good luck. In Scotland, a black cat arriving at your home is a sign of prosperity. In ancient Celtic tradition, the cat Seath, a fairy cat, was black and was considered a blessing. In the Islamic world, cats of all colors are respected and protected, following the tradition that the Prophet Muhammad was fond of cats. The cultures that weren't shaped by Vox in Rama don't fear black cats. The cultures that were shaped by it do. The fear maps precisely onto the sphere of influence of the institution that manufactured it. It's not a human universal, it's a cultural implant. A piece of institutional programming that was installed in one civilization and that has persisted through cultural transmission for 700 years after the installation. I'm not telling you to adopt a black cat as a spiritual guardian. I'm telling you that the animal you were taught to flinch at was sacred to the most medically advanced civilization of the ancient world. That the fear you carry was manufactured by a papal document in 1233 for the purpose of eliminating the healers who kept them. That the mass killing of cats may have worsened the deadliest pandemic in European history. That the superstition is not ancient wisdom but institutional propaganda. That the flinch you feel is not instinct but programming. I'm asking who benefits when you fear the animal that every ancient civilization associated with healing and protection. I'm asking what was lost when the women who kept them were burned. I'm asking what knowledge was destroyed when the healer's tradition was severed by an institution that called her a witch and her cat a devil. I'm asking what the black cat was before someone decided you should be afraid of it.